The big topic around the 2021 filing season, with the COVID shutdown last year and so many people having to work from home, and this big question of the deduction of home office expenses. Now, I have discussed this. I did a detailed outline of how and when you can deduct home office expenses, and that was towards the end of last year. And of course, I have alluded to this also in previous webinars, and I really have emphasized also that people should be very careful about claiming home office expenses to ensure that they do properly meet all the requirements of the legislation, and then they only claim the expenses that they are actually entitled to. So the relevant provisions of the Act are Section 23B dealing with private expenses, which says you can't deduct any private expenses, but then it does have a proviso to say that if there's part of your home that is set aside to be used as an office, as long as it is suitably equipped and regularly and exclusively used for the purposes of the taxpayer's trade, then related expenditure can be claimed. And Section 23M, which prohibits the deduction of most expenses for employees, but it does have a carve-out to say that deductions that are allowed under Section 23B may be deducted where the person is an employee. But there are conditions attached to that. If the person is an employee, then they must be they must be working mainly in that home office, and they must be required to be working at home by the employer. So there are quite a lot of terms and conditions that go into the deduction of home office expenses. SARS has opened a particular website on this, on home office expenses, and you'll see here that they give all sorts of information. They refer to their webinar that they hosted on the 9th of July, and they've got a link if you missed the webinar, and I really do recommend that you do have a look at that webinar if you did miss it. And also you can share this link with your clients so that they are aware of the SARS rules as well. Then also they go through when can a person claim home office expenses, what are the requirements, what kind of expenditure can you claim? And this is important as well. It's not all expenditure that can be claimed. It's expenditure that relates to the home office. And so it's expenditure that really links to the premises as such, and then links to the home office within those premises. And so we're talking about rent, cost of repairs, and other expenses, which can include various things. And they do say that other typical home office expenditure that may qualify for deduction can be phones, internet, stationery. But be very careful, because SARS has indicated, and you'll see this if you watch their webinar. As I say, if you haven't done so already, please take time to do that. You will see that their interpretation around this is extremely narrow, and they certainly are not going to be taking a lenient approach in allowing the deduction of home office expenses. So it's really important that you understand exactly what kind of expenses can be claimed, how to do the calculation, and how to disclose it on your ITR 12 return. And you'll see that if you are just an employee who is not carrying on your own trade, then your home office expenses would come under code 4028. And that's a specific line for home office expenses. Okay, and then they give some indication on actually getting that onto your tax return. And then they also talk about the capital gains tax implications. So I don't want to spend too much time going over this, but it would be remiss of me if I didn't at least mention this in the course of talking about the 2021 filing season. So please be very careful to make sure that you are 100% familiar with the legislation on this and exactly who's eligible and what type of expenses